We're a little more than 2 weeks out from the April 1st election, and among the most talked about races on the ballot, of course, voters set to determine the balance of the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
And that race is also slated to be the most expensive judicial race in history, with ads blanketing the airwaves. So News 3 thought it was time for a reality check on those ads. Political reporter Will Kenneally is here with more.
Both liberal candidate Susan Crawford and conservative candidate Brad Schimmel are sitting judges, and we've seen attack ads challenging their sentencing records on the bench.
It was just a one-time thing. That's what Brad Schimmel said when he gave a, quote, sweet bargain to a man who sexually assaulted a 10-year-old girl.
It's terrifying that Susan Crawford would consider a 4-year sentence appropriate for raping a child.
Now, let's clarify what's going on here. Judges in Wisconsin get to consider a variety of factors when imposing a sentence. This can be the nature of the crime. So for a sexual assault case, for example, if the victim contracted an STD during the crime, that might be an aggravating factor that the judge may consider when imposing a sentence. But overall, judges are supposed to consider some restraint when imposing the sentences. Now, this comes from a 1970s Supreme Court case where the court writes, "The sentence imposed in each case should call for the minimum amount of custody or confinement, which is consistent with the protection of the public, the gravity of the offense, and the rehabilitative needs of the defendant." The other thing to note here is that the state Supreme Court is not a trial court, that the justices don't deal with sentencing defendants. Now, UW Law professor John Gross tells us that the state Supreme Court may review some sentences that lower courts decide, but they don't impose new sentences themselves. In fact, we spoke with both candidates running for the court, asking them what they thought the role of the court is here in Wisconsin.
So the Wisconsin Supreme Court every year decides cases that cross every different area of law. And that can be things like election law. It's a common topic to come in front of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The court currently has 2 cases before it on women's reproductive health care.
There's 2 things here. One is what the role the court's supposed to have. The role the court is supposed to have is to simply interpret the law the way it's written, apply it the way it's written, and not legislate from the bench.
Now, combined, both candidates are spending tens of millions of dollars on these kind of TV ads, which brings us to the money part of this equation. Now, this race is on track to be the most expensive judicial race in history. Now, an estimate by WestPolitics.com from last week shows that nearly $59 million has been spent already in this race. Now, this can have an impact on the candidates running. We spoke with judicial elections expert Douglas Keith about what that means for the judges day to day.
There's a lot of research showing that judges actually change their opinions in an election year. They're harsher in criminal cases. They're more likely to rule against defendants in criminal cases because they don't want to be attacked as soft on crime in their next campaign ad. And I don't think anyone thinks that that's how judges should be making their decision, and that someone's freedom or someone's liberties should depend on whether or not it's an election year.
I'm Will Kenneally with this reality check.